The Sex Machine by David Key. Copyright 1968. Beeline Books, Incorporated. Chapter 1. She was a big, sexy woman. Dr. Alex P. Hendershot, Associate Professor of Biology at Peacock University in Upper New York State, strode across the leaf-covered campus on his way to the new high-rise faculty apartments with sweating palms, a slight glaze to his groin. He was finished with classes for the day, and with the image of Lisa Deerfield, the blonde beauty in his 3 o'clock class, fresh in his horny mind, he knew his little test just had to work. For days he had planned the test. It was to happen on Friday, and because he was afraid it would not work, he was going to try it out on the buxom maid on his floor. He would be embarrassed to tears if he tried it out on his main target, Lisa Deerfield, and it failed. The elevator, normally quite fast, was far too slow for him today. He trembled as it finally stopped at the 8th floor, and the sluggish doors opened. He literally ran to his apartment door and fumbled with his key to open it. In the side apartment, he removed his jacket and put on his white laboratory coat. He mixed a strong scotch and soda to help give him strength and carried the drink with him into his small home laboratory. The room was perhaps 15 by 20 feet. It was filled with long tables covered with test tubes, beakers, cages for his hamsters, and white mice, Bunsen burners, bottles of chemicals, and dead specimens of mice, frogs, lizards, and other pleasant animals. A complete distilling apparatus ran almost the full length of the room. Dr. Hendershot stopped at the far end of the room and looked lovingly down at the squat machine that looked every bit like machines used by doctors to give or take electrocardiograms. It stood only 3 feet high and was 2 feet wide and 18 inches deep. A back panel was riddled with dials, buttons, and indicators. Alex Hendershot opened the hinged top and studied the assortment of plastic containers and tubes inside. He removed a plastic lid from the largest container and went to the table. He picked up a covered beaker of liquid, looked at his watch, and carried the beaker to the machine. After a final glance at his watch, he poured an ounce of the liquid into the plastic container and closed the lid on the machine. "That should do it, eh?" he said to the machine. "Takes 10 minutes for you to reach full impact, and the maid gets here sharply at 3:30. Perfect, I would say, eh?" The machine had already begun a low humming, and the dials and indicators on the back panel had begun to indicate life. Alex admired the machine's handiwork and pressed the button marked Easy Mark. He settled on the couch in the living room and left the laboratory door open. He lit his pipe and waited, listening to the distant hum of the machine as it grew louder. He loosened his necktie and took a long drink of his scotch. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He took off his thick spectacles and laid them gently on a lamp table. Without them, the maid would look far better to him. It had to work. He had spent more than 10 years on it. He began to have doubts that the maid was a true challenge. She seemed the type to jump into the sack with any man who crooked his finger and showed the proper interest. But Alex had showed all the interest in the world on past Fridays when she had come at 3:30 to clean the apartment, and nothing had worked. It was the story of his life. At 3:28, he got up and put a record on the record player near the back wall. The record was Blue Moon, and it always put him into a proper mood. He hoped it would help with the maid. Already the machine was humming with a high, steady pitch, and he felt a great arousal start throughout his body. His passion was reaching dangerous proportions, and that was bad. He didn't want to jump the poor woman as soon as she walked into the apartment. He couldn't rape her. If she didn't come to him of her own free will, the whole thing would be a failure. When he heard the key clicking in the door, he sat back on the couch and tried to get his feelings under control, but his silent voice was literally shouting out his feelings. "Hot damn," he kept muttering under his breath. "Come on in, sexbot. Come to papa, you hot mama, you." The maid came into the room and saw nothing more than a quite respectable-looking professor sitting primly on the couch. There was no indication of what was going on in his mind or of what his silent voice was uttering. "Attention, Professor," she said. "Hope I won't disturb you." Dr. Alex Hendershot kept control of his passions and nodded at the woman to indicate that she would not disturb him. But he watched her closely, studying the enormous and matronly breasts, the wide matronly hips, the round matronly face, and the very sexy way she stood beside her cart of cleaning materials. God, how he had wanted this big, sexy woman. And God Almighty, how he wanted her now more than anything else in the whole wide world. As he watched, he was certain that he saw her smile wickedly at him. Could the machine be taking effect on her already? He hoped so. But the maid pushed the cart past him, grabbed up a handful of cleaning materials and a bucket and disappeared into the bathroom. At first, he heard the clinking of glass as she shifted bottles and stuff around the bathroom shelves. Then the apartment was silent, except for the high-pitched whine of the machine and Dr. Alex Hendershot's powerful breathing. Alex Hendershot waited. He thought he knew why the woman had become silent. Suddenly, she appeared in the bathroom doorway, and the professor knew he was victorious. The great pink breast with her wide, almost obscene dark nipples pointing at him greeted his eyes first. He quickly flashed his eyes over her entire naked body. The look on her face told him more than he had hoped to know. "Hope you don't mind, Professor," the maid said, half apologetically, "but I just had to take off my clothes." "Quite all right," Alex said primly, maintaining his position on the couch. "It is rather stuffy in here." "Oh, it ain't that," she said, coming to stand before him. "Maybe it's the music or something, but I just felt like taking them off. My, oh my, Professor, did anybody ever tell you that you got a hell of a bulge in your middle?" Alex Hendershot looked down at his lap and saw that she was indeed right. "So I have," he said calmly. Inside, he was going all to pieces. The humming of the machine grew louder, and the big maid began to dance in front of him to the beat of the music. The huge breast swayed in front of him, and he knew he would soon climax if he didn't make his move. He got up and took off his shirt. At that point, the machine moved to a higher decibel, and the woman lunged at him. Her great body clutched at him, and he felt the warmth of her all over him. He wriggled out of his trousers and then lost his professional decorum altogether. "Hey, baby," he shouted. "Come on, baby. Let's you and me make hay while the sun shines bright." "Yahoo!" the maid yelled. They danced around the room, kicking their heels and shouting long strings of delightful obscenities. The big woman kept grabbing for his dork. Then he danced like a madman, far out of tune with the music. He shouted, "Hot stuff! Hot, hot, hot! Let's make hay! Come on, kid! Let's get prone! Hip-dee-doo! Wow-wee! Socko! Pow! Zap! Papa-diddle-doo!" "Come on, Daddy-o!" the maid shrieked. "Slip it to me, Professor!" The machine was now humming at an almost painful pitch. Dr. Alex Hendershot had forgotten all about the machine. He didn't know who he was or what he was, and all he knew was that he never felt quite this way before, even on his many nights of deepest sexual frustration, and he was going to attain satisfaction. He grabbed the maid and threw her onto the long couch. She landed in a happy heap and opened her arms and legs to him. "You got it, Professor," she cried, "and you know where to put it. Don't even bother to knock, Daddy-o." For an instant, Alex Hendershot gathered a semblance of his senses. He recalled that he had not enjoyed normal sex for more than 12 years, ever since his wife had walked out on him. He recalled that for nearly all those 12 years, he had lusted for nearly every woman he saw, and he remembered that not a goddamn one of them would give him the time of day. But that would be changed now. He had a machine. He literally leaped onto the heavy, waiting body of the maid. He was not even nervous. His hands gripped the enormous breasts, and as the woman writhed under him and continued with a wealth of finely tuned obscenities, he found the mark and plunged downward. "Hot damn!" the maid shouted. "Big, big, big! Hard, hard, hard! Long, long, long! Shoot the works, Daddy-o!" She gyrated awkwardly but passionately under him, and he tried to set up a pace. He began long, even strokes, but it was impossible to maintain any rhythm. The woman was on fire. She couldn't lay still, and she couldn't cooperate. She was merely a woman grasping for full satisfaction in such a rush, she had no true idea of how to achieve it. And it had been so long for Dr. Alex P. Hendershot, he was in no position to teach her a damn thing. But something strange was afoot. He had expected to climax when the woman first appeared naked in the bathroom door. He was certain he was going to climax when they were dancing wildly around the room. And when he entered her, he was absolutely positive that he would hit the peak within a half-dozen strokes. Yet here he was, plunging and pounding and ramming the woman with great stroke after great stroke, and he had not climaxed. The strange part was that he felt as though he were in the final stages. The stages where sexual enjoyment is at its highest point, but where the enjoyment is so brief and fleeting that the participant feels cheated. This time he was getting his money's worth. That magnificent feeling lingered and built up, but it did not end. Alex went on and felt his passions rising far beyond where they had ever been before. He knew the maid was experiencing the same thing. It was marvelous, great, unbelievably beautiful. Suddenly the maid picked up the rhythm and he found that they were stroking furiously together. Their loins slapped as he rammed home. She rose to meet his every plunge and felt the juices flowing to overflowing with each drop and each slippery, sweet withdrawal. My God, he thought, could this be me? Or is it the machine? Their screams rose and drowned out the whining of the machine. Their obscenities blended in a chorus of erotic and exotic language that no outsider listening to them could possibly have understood. Then, in a technicolor burst of pure ecstasy, they both climaxed. The machine, they noticed at last, was silent.